Hey guys, welcome into the 14. I'm Nick Cole, and we're breaking down each SEC football game in Week 12 from a betting perspective. Today, we're talking about the Louisiana Monroe Warhawks visiting the LSU Tigers. This game's going to be played on Saturday, November 20th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time at Tiger Stadium in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. This game's going to be broadcast on ESPN2. From a betting perspective, LSU opened as a 28-point favorite, and that line has moved to 29 as of Thursday afternoon. The over-under opened at 58.5 and has dropped to 57.5 as of the recording of this video. We'll bring in our betting analyst, Christopher Smith. Christopher, this is one of those rare opportunities late in the season to get an in-state game with a couple of FBS teams, have a little bit of a good time, right, in Louisiana.
Yeah, it is. And I'm angry at the Warhawks because they delivered one of my bad beats of the year that I've suffered so far. But what will be really interesting is if LSU wins this week and next week and then gets bowl eligible. I would probably doubt that they take a bowl game, but that would make for an interesting talking point. But let's first figure out if there's any value in this game for our bettors. Why don't you let us know about the weather forecast, any injuries that are going on with these players, and Nick's news and notes.
Sure. So let's start with the weather in this game. Saturday night, Baton Rouge. Again, we mentioned a late kickoff. It's 8 p.m. local time kickoff. So we have temperatures in the low 60s and early in the game, and then drop into the 50s as we go along. Chance of rain for this one, so watch out for that. But the wind is only forecasted at 5 miles an hour. So even if it does rain, probably not anything major to worry about from a wind side of things. On the injury standpoint, let's start with LSU. Left guard Ed Ingram missed last week's game and is questionable for this one. Right guard Jason Hines was declared out for the season before last week's game. We've got safety Sage Ryan missing the last two games. Safety Major Burns remaining out. Defensive tackle Joseph Evans is out indefinitely, and there are 9 other LSU players that have been ruled out for the season. So the list continues to grow at LSU. We've got a coaching change. We've got some injuries. We've got some guys that are looking for maybe a transfer. We got guys that are thinking about the NFL draft. There's a lot of people, a lot of moving parts that are not going to be in this game for various reasons. Most of them we knew about prior to this week, though. On the ULM side of things, they don't really have anything significant on the injuries standpoint. So Warhawks will be healthy as they bid to potentially pull the unthinkable upset, right? And that brings me to our news and notes. LSU lost in overtime last week to Arkansas. But do Tigers fans even really care at this point, right? That's kind of where I'm at. They lost 16-13. The Golden Boot returns to Arkansas for the first time in 5 years. And the Tigers now, you mentioned it a little bit earlier, now need wins not only against UL Monroe, but against Texas A&M to achieve bowl eligibility, which is kind of a tough ask. And then to your point, do they even really want the bowl if they could get to it, right? Garrett Nussmeier actually played quarterback for the Tigers for the majority of the game against Arkansas last week. We've been getting used to sort of seeing Max Johnson hold that responsibility. Nussmeier threw 2 interceptions in that game, including the one in overtime that ultimately cost them that game. So it'll be interesting to see how they divvy up playing time at quarterback this week. But I'm pretty sure as I ran through that, all LSU fans heard me say was womp, 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 Lincoln Riley, right? On the other side of the line, UL Monroe is also 4-6. And they also lost last week to an Arkansas school at home. Butch Jones, who is the coach at Arkansas State now, just beat Terry Bowden and Rich Rod. And yeah, you may be wondering what year it is, what teams I'm talking about, but I'm talking about UL Monroe and Arkansas State. Arkansas State, which is just 2-8 against Butch Jones, scored 10 points in the fourth quarter last week to come back and beat the Warhawks 27-24. We actually, on this show, talked a little bit about UL Monroe earlier in this season. They were a week 1 opponent of Kentucky, which, as a reminder, the Wildcats beat the Warhawks 45-10 at Kroger Field in week 1. And then the last thing I bring up, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but the TV networks did everybody in the state of Louisiana a favor by making this a late kickoff. It's given everybody a chance to get some gumbo, to get in the stadium, enjoy this in-state game where LSU's actually won 33 consecutive games against in-state schools, and they're 3-0 all-time against UL Monroe. The last meeting coming in 2010, a 51-0 win. That was back in the Les Miles era there, so not much to glean from that. But I would point out that if you're looking for any sort of a sign for Monroe, Ed Orgeron does have a loss at LSU against a Sun Belt team under his belt. He lost to Troy in 2016. So if you're holding out hope for the Warhawks, there is that memory lingering as this Ed Orgeron era comes to a close. Christopher, when it comes to betting this game, we've got a line right around 4 touchdowns, maybe a point over it in some places now. How do you see analyzing this one?
Yeah, it's sort of shocking to say if you looked at ULM early this season and the preseason expectations, or if you looked at LSU maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. But right now, these are 2 bet-on teams in a weird way. ULM has won outright as double-digit underdogs 3 times, including the biggest and the 9th biggest upset of the entire season, that being plus 32 versus Liberty and plus 23.5 versus Troy. So I'm not calling for the outright upset here, but ULM has been very, very good as an underdog this season. And LSU is 2-1-1 against the spread in its last 4 games, with a total margin against the spread in those games of plus 36.5. So every week it seems like there's a new hypothesis on why this is the week that LSU will give up and move on to next season, including this week with Orgeron throwing his coordinators under the bus publicly. But this team is 3 plays away from being 7-3 and 5-2 in the SEC. So they have not let go of the rope, so to speak, especially the players who are not out with quote unquote injuries at this point are all still playing hard. You look at the ULM defense as well, and it definitely is susceptible if LSU, plays well with its talent. This is a team that allowed 444 passing yards to Arkansas State last weekend. And a few games before that, App State ran for 251 on them. So, and it's also an offense in ULM that only managed 10, as you mentioned, against Kentucky, 6 against Coastal Carolina, and 12 against Jackson State. So as well as they've played as underdogs in a lot of games this season, there's a reason to believe that LSU's recent streak of playing really well against the spread has a good chance of continuing here. But Nick, why don't you tell us who you're picking in this game? And also, do you have anything special for our audience out there?
I do actually, Christopher. Thank you for asking. I got a chance for you to double up on the amount of money that you can use to bet on this game. Our partnership with Action 24/7 Sportsbooks giving new customers a chance to, for a limited time, to get a deposit matched 100% up to $800. So if you sign up today and make your first deposit using the code SOUTH14, and that's the important part on the deposit code, SOUTH14, Action will double your money up to $800. Download the app or visit action247.com to get started. Action 24/7 is by Tennesseans for Tennesseans. You've got action. My action on this game, I think, is going to be on the LSU Tigers. I hate laying more than 4 touchdowns, but for the purposes of making our picks for the show, I'm going to take LSU minus 29. But if I'm going to shop around to maybe think about getting my money involved in this one, obviously I'd much prefer it to be on the other side of 28 if things maybe move over between now and kickoff. But I'm not counting on that, so I'm not sure it's going to make my card. But I do like the over 57.5 in this game. You mentioned that LSU could put up some points on that ULM defense that's susceptible. So I do, if I'm going to take LSU, I'm going to lay that many points. I'm kind of going all in on the fact that I think they're going to get most of the way to 57 all by themselves. How do you view this one?
Yeah, I'm taking the same thing as you are at LSU minus 29 over 57.5. But I mean, the thing that you can count on recently with LSU is that their defense is going to play well. So it's not, that's a lot of points for a team that scored, 14. I mean, the Alabama game was 20-14 and LSU played great, but they still only scored 2 touchdowns against a defense that isn't great. So I don't know, they're playing kind of like a baseball team that is out of the playoff race with 12 games to go and letting Nussmeier get some reps and kind of, looking at some younger players and kind of playing more toward developing for next year. So, that covering as a 29-point favorite is probably not something that I want to personally get behind with my money. But if you force me to make a pick, I'm going to go with you and go LSU minus 29 over 57.5. But for me, it's not one that's going to have my money riding on it this week. But for Nick Cole, I'm Christopher Smith with the 14, and we'll talk to you next week.